guys, my name is Olivia. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all things adulting. I talk about Chicago content, things to consider when moving here. I also talk about some home stuff, finance stuff, everything in between. So definitely like, comment, subscribe down below. But let's just get started with this video. So as you can see from the title below, we're going to be talking about some uncommon advice that you maybe don't hear from other people when it comes to choosing your next apartment, particularly your first apartment. Of course, this can apply to anybody. This is just my experience as someone who's been in 3 different leases in 2 different states with different types of residential kind of vibes, whether it was a high rise, a mid rise, or just an apartment complex. Definitely just some things to consider and to take heed of, no matter if you're living in those particular spaces that I mentioned or if you're going to be living in like a landlord style home. Take heed before you sign your first lease. I find that these tips are not things that I normally hear on YouTube videos or just from friends and family. I had to learn them my own way through experience. I just wanted to kind of give this to you all. If you need it, if you don't, throw it away. Whatever. So my first advice that I would give you all is to not sign a long lease. I know that you just found your dream apartment. It looks beautiful. It's in the best location. Life is great. But I definitely don't recommend signing a lease more than 12 months at a time. Definitely because things could change in your life. You don't want to be tied down to like a 24-month lease. Oh my gosh, a 36-month lease or anything outlandish beyond that. Because yes, you're able to lock in a rate for today and that will last you for the blank amount of years or etc. that you would do a longer lease in. But I definitely recommend the shorter the better. With that piece of advice, honestly, just evaluate your lifestyle. Do you feel like the career that you're in, the job you're in, the location you're in, the situation you're in is going to be long lasting? If you can't really confidently answer that, then I definitely recommend just sticking to a traditional 12-month lease, or if you're able to, even shorter. It just depends on your lifestyle. And also, if you're going to do a shorter lease, consider what month is that lease going to cut off, and because then you're going to have to find another place. So let's say you do a 9-month lease and it ends in the middle of June. When you're looking for your next apartment, June apartments are super expensive compared to moving in, let's say, January. So you definitely want to consider that when you're figuring out when your lease ends. For example, I signed a 15-month lease before and it ended in the middle of summer, and that new apartment that I had to find was more expensive that time of year than it would have been, let's say, January or even February. If I would have ended that lease in the 12-month period, which would have been February instead of May, I would have been able to lock in my next apartment at a much cheaper rate in the February rates versus a May rate. That could have saved me a lot of money in the long run with my second apartment if I would have just let my first apartment end in a 12-month period. I only saved a little bit of money going from a 12-month lease to a 15-month lease. And if I would have just made it just a 12-month lease, I would have saved much more money in the long run when my next apartment was available in February. I hope that makes sense. My second advice that maybe people don't consider is to definitely know how much it costs to break a lease, or at least average rate if they're not going to tell you exact numbers when you're doing the showing of the apartment. If they can't give you exact numbers, at least ask an estimate before you even sign a lease, because you definitely want to know if life changes, if something drastic happens, if I get a new job and I have to relocate, etc., can I afford to break the lease? For example, for me, I bought my first home in 2020 and I broke my first apartment lease to get into my new home, and I never even knew about a breaking lease fee at all. I just thought that if I gave them notice I can leave. Maybe that was just my ignorance, but didn't know that it was going to cost so much. So that was something that I had to consider when I was in the buying process, if this was a time that I could even buy because of my lease. So you just want to be mindful. There could be more other situations that's not like mine, such as you have a really good job opportunity, but you don't know what to do with your apartment. You want to go travel. Something happens with your personal life where you have to get up and leave. You You want to be able to know that you can afford to break the lease, or at least have an idea of what's going on when it comes to breaking the lease. And also, there's a side note with this advice. You definitely want to figure out if your landlord or your property management company, whatever it is, you definitely want to ask if they allow subletting. Subletting is essentially letting somebody else finish the rest of your lease out and you passing the lease to them. It's under your name technically. Most subleases is under your name, so if anything crazy happens under that new renter that's renting under your lease, it's still under your responsibility. That's usually how it goes for most commonly subleases. There might be different variations of the rules, but regardless, you want to figure that information out. You just want to figure out, if I have to leave, what are my options on leaving? How can I leave safely with my money intact, etc. I know you're excited to move into your dream place and you're not thinking that leaving is something that you would consider, but you just don't know. And personally for me, in all 3 apartments that I've rented out, I've always had a situation where I had a possibility of leaving or actually did leave, which was my first apartment. My next uncommon advice, once again, this is just kind of like a preparation of the worst kind of situation, is you want to make sure that you get a lease that if something drastic were to happen in your life, such as you lose your job, or let's say you take another job that maybe doesn't pay as well, or you want to start over in your career. Let's say you want to jump from, for me, like nursing to, I don't know, an entry-level tech job. These are the things that I got to consider, that maybe my income's going to go down. Can I still afford my apartment if I decide to make those changes? So you definitely want to make sure that you are really living below your means when you're choosing an apartment, because you just don't know what life's going to throw at you, and you want to be able to always afford your rent, right? We don't want to have any evictions or none of that. You definitely just want to make sure you live way below your means. You definitely want to crunch some numbers and say, what is the least amount of money that I can make to still afford my rent and my essential bills? Because just in case life throws a wrench at you where you have to pivot somehow, some way when it comes to your career, you know that you can still afford your rent. And of course, have an emergency savings. Try to have 3 to 6 months of emergency savings if you can prior to moving into your first apartment. If you have the ability to maybe stay at a family's home, friend's home, and just save up that savings before you move into your first place, that'll definitely be important to do. Of course, save for your 3 to 6 months savings, save to fill up that apartment. So you definitely just want to make sure you're prepared for the expenses of not just your rent and bills, but also furnishing your place and having some savings. Just prepare for emergencies, essentially, is what I'm trying to throw at you all. For my 4th uncommon advice, I'm going to throw some random questions out to you all that you should definitely consider asking when you're doing your tours of these apartments that you're looking at, because I'm telling you, these are some of the questions that I didn't consider when it comes to the issues that I had to deal with throughout the various places I lived in. And so I just want to throw these questions out to you. So it's not really more so of advice, it's just questions that I recommend you consider. And I'm looking at my sheet because I wrote a few. Some of these questions might not be a reality or a possibility, but if it is, great. If it isn't, you tried, right? So my first one is, ask the leasing agent if you are able to do a noise test. Essentially what that means is, if there's an apartment that you're looking at and this is the one that's available, sometimes you'll go on tours and you're touring model rooms, so this wouldn't really apply. But if you're actually touring the apartment that you could potentially rent out, see if the leasing agent is open to you going to another empty room, maybe that's next door to the room that you might be leasing out. See if you can make some noise in there, maybe play some loud music, hit the countertop, just kind of making some random noises, obviously in mind of keeping the place nice and safe. But maybe going upstairs, if there's an empty unit above you, maybe just walk really hard on the floor. See if that helps with a noise test. Definitely recommend that, because there's a lot of places that don't have good walls, that don't have good insulation to really block some of that sound. So if that's really important to you, you really want to check that out. If that doesn't bother you, then don't let it bother you. And I'm just going to run through some of the other ones. Some other questions are, How are packages managed? How are the maintenance hours of operations? If community is important to you, then you definitely want to ask, does the building curate events? This is particularly more so for the mid and high rises to find community. Maybe you're in a new city or a new town and you just want to meet new people within your complex. This is a great time to ask that kind of question. If you have a dog, I would definitely recommend asking, is there dog trashes on the property or just simply just trash cans in general? Personally, for me, that was one of my biggest issues with the place I live now. I had to advocate super heavy for a dog trash can because for some reason, the block that my building is on does not have a trash can, and it's so difficult to throw away trash. So when I just moved in, I advocated to the leasing agent, please get us a trash can on the property. And now we have one. Shout out to me. But you definitely want to ask because those little details really ring your ringer, you know? Another question could be, how do they handle large trashes? Big boxes, is there somewhere we can throw it, toss it? Because trust me, when you're unboxing all your new furniture, things like that, you definitely just want to know where those things are. I'm telling you these type of questions not because it's going to make or break you picking your lease, but it's definitely things that make your peace of mind much easier when you're there. So things to consider, things to ask. Of course, ask your legit questions like how much does it cost? How do you pay for it? Like how does that process work? Things like that. The big questions, obviously, you should ask, but this video is more so on uncommon advice, questions that you should really be asking during the walkthrough, or at least the process when you're ready to sign the dotted line. One question that I'll ask, kind of connecting to community, is what is the lifestyle demographic in this building? Is it mainly families? Is it single professionals? Is it healthcare professionals? Things like that. You definitely would like to know that because it kind of tells you who the people coming in and out the building. And if you're looking to create community, you can know if there's like-minded individuals in your community. Another random question is, do they change the air filters out at least 3 to 4 times a year? Do they have maintenance coming and changing that? Because that's definitely something that's important to do for a home, a building, wherever you are. Changing air filters are important, so just ask them if that's something that they do, if that's something that they implement in their budget. And then also ask if they have a smoke alarm, carbon monoxide alarm. See if they have that installed in every apartment because that is really important. Those are some questions that I just think you should just ask. It's more so of a run-through list of some questions to consider. But definitely pay attention to the small details. Even bring your iPhone, Android charger and plug it into every charger. Test out all the outlets before you decide to sign the dotted line on that apartment. And my last uncommon advice that I'm going to share today, you definitely want to drive and walk around the area that your new apartment is going to be at different times of the day. Drive around in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, in the night. Do you like the vibe that's going on in terms of what you're seeing and experiencing? Is there sidewalks that are helpful to kind of navigate the community? Go into those places, see their options when it comes to your favorite food, your favorite ingredients. My first apartment, I was like, oh wow, there's a grocery store, cool. But I didn't walk into it, and I realized that a lot of my Caribbean options were not in that grocery store. And so if I would have known, that maybe would have been something I could have considered when it came to choosing my first apartment. You definitely just want to kind of just see what's in your community and test it out at different times of day, because it might feel safe in the daytime, but at nighttime, people are lurking, right? You just want to be mindful of where you're living and consider your safety. All right, that's really all I have today. I hope you all have a great day. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know down below what advice would you give somebody who's getting their first apartment, or any other advice that maybe you experienced, or if this is going to be your first apartment, congrats. I'm super excited for you. Let me know down below, how are you feeling about that process? All right, guys, hope you have a blessed day. Bye.